The Haunting of Marianne, a true story. Marianne had always been a skeptic. Ghost stories, haunted houses, none of it ever seemed real to her. Growing up in a small town in southern France, the tales of spirits and old curses were nothing more than superstition passed down from one generation to another. That is, until she moved into the house on Rue de la Lune. It was a cold autumn evening when Marianne first laid eyes on the old stone cottage. Nestled on the outskirts of the village, surrounded by dense, towering trees, the house seemed like something out of a forgotten time. It had been abandoned for decades, but Marianne, ever practical, saw it as the perfect fixer-upper. She ignored the rumors swirling around the house, whispers of strange sounds, missing persons, and the chilling legend of La Femme Noire. The locals warned her, but Marianne didn't believe in ghosts. The price was right, and the isolation appealed to her. So, against everyone's advice, she bought it. The first night was unsettling. The moment she stepped inside, the air seemed heavier. The walls seemed to breathe in a way she couldn't explain. But Marianne brushed it off as old house quirks. She unpacked, made herself a light dinner, and settled in. As the wind howled through the cracks in the windows, Marianne lit a fire. The flames danced, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Her mind wandered, thinking about the village's stories. La Femme Noire was said to be a woman who had lived in the house centuries ago, a widow who, after losing her child, had gone mad and vanished, never to be seen again. Some claimed her ghost haunted the place, searching for her lost child, dragging anyone who crossed her path into the darkness with her. A sharp creak from upstairs snapped Marianne out of her thoughts. She stiffened, listening intently. Was it the house settling, or something else? She tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but her heart raced in her chest. She decided to investigate. Slowly, cautiously, she ascended the staircase. With each step, the wooden planks groaned beneath her feet. When she reached the second floor, a cold draft swept through the hallway, sending a shiver down her spine. She stood at the entrance of a room she hadn't noticed before. The door was ajar. Pushing it open, Marianne found herself standing in what appeared to be an old nursery. Dust-covered toys lay scattered across the floor, and a small broken crib sat in the corner. The air in the room was frigid, colder than anywhere else in the house. Suddenly, the door behind her slammed shut. Marianne's heart leapt into her throat. She rushed to the door, trying to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged through her as she struggled, but then just as suddenly, it unlocked. She stumbled back, her breath shaky. Something was wrong. As the night went on, the strange occurrences intensified. Doors opened and closed on their own. The sound of faint, distant crying echoed through the halls. The most unsettling of all was the shadowy figure she saw in her peripheral vision, always watching her, but vanishing the moment she turned to look. Marianne began to feel an oppressive presence in the house, something dark and malicious. It was as if the very air was alive with malevolence. No matter how many lights she turned on, there were always pockets of darkness that seemed to move, shift, and close in on her. Desperate for answers, she spoke with the village elder. The woman's wrinkled face paled when Marianne mentioned the house. She told her that La Femme Noire had been more than just a legend. The woman, Émilie, had been accused of witchcraft. She had taken her own life in grief after her son disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Since then, anyone who dared enter the house suffered. Many vanished. Others were driven to madness. The elder warned Marianne to leave before it was too late. But Marianne was stubborn. She didn't believe in ghosts or curses, not really. However, she couldn't deny the growing fear that gnawed at her. Over the next few days, Marianne's world began to unravel. Every night, the cries grew louder, closer, and more anguished. She couldn't sleep. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and she began to see the shadowy figure more often, always at the edge of her vision, always watching. One night, as she lay in bed, the crying turned into a blood-curdling scream. She bolted upright, her heart pounding, and there, standing at the foot of her bed, was La Femme Noire. Dressed in tattered black garments, her face was a mask of sorrow and rage. Her eyes, hollow and dark, bore into Marianne's soul. Frozen in terror, Marianne could only watch as the ghostly figure drifted closer. Cold fingers brushed against her skin, and a voice low and echoing whispered, "My child, my child." The next thing Marianne knew, she was being dragged out of bed, her body thrown violently across the room. She scrambled to her feet and ran. The house groaned and moaned as if alive, and shadows stretched and twisted like hands reaching for her. Marianne fled into the night, the wind howling, the cries of La Femme Noire following her into the darkness. The aftermath. The next morning, villagers found Marianne wandering the edge of the forest, disoriented and mumbling incoherently. She was taken to the hospital, but her mind never recovered. She would sit in silence for hours, her eyes wide with fear, only speaking to repeat the same chilling words over and over again. She's still looking for her child. She's still looking. The house on Rue de la Lune was eventually abandoned once more, and no one dared to enter it again. The legend of La Femme Noire grew, and Marianne became part of the tale. A cautionary figure of what happens when you ignore the warnings of the past. To this day, some say if you walk past the house at night, you can hear the faint cries of a woman, still searching for her lost child, still waiting for someone to help her. After the villagers found Marianne on the outskirts of the forest, the small town buzzed with rumors and speculation. No one dared to speak openly about the house on Rue de la Lune, but whispers circulated about the horrors Marianne had endured. The elderly warned the younger generation not to go near the property, but human curiosity can be dangerous. The investigation begins. A week after Marianne was found, the local authorities decided to investigate. 2 police officers, Jean and Laurent, were sent to assess the house. They didn't believe in the supernatural either, chalking Marianne's condition up to a mental breakdown. The idea of a haunted house seemed laughable. As they approached the house, though, both men felt an odd chill. The air seemed heavier, just as Marianne had described. Still, they pressed on. The front door, old and rotting, creaked loudly as they pushed it open, revealing a long, dimly lit hallway. "What's that smell?" Jean asked, wrinkling his nose. A foul, decaying stench hung in the air, like something rotten had seeped into the walls. Laurent shrugged. "It's just an old house. Maybe some animals got in." They began their search, moving room to room. In the daylight, the house seemed far less menacing, though the strange, oppressive feeling persisted. Dust covered everything, as if time had stopped the moment Marianne fled. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the floorboards groaned under their weight. But nothing seemed out of place. No signs of forced entry, no visible threats. As they ventured upstairs, they came to the nursery, the room Marianne had spoken about in her fragmented recollections. The air was colder here, and even Jean, the more skeptical of the two, couldn't help but shiver. A broken crib sat in the corner, covered in dust. Faded wallpaper, once decorated with cheerful animals, peeled from the walls. Laurent leaned down to examine the crib. "Strange," he muttered. It's like someone was using this not too long ago. Jean raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? This place has been abandoned for decades. Laurent pointed at the wooden crib. Look, no dust on the inside. Almost like something or someone was placed here recently. Jean's stomach tightened, but he refused to show it. He laughed it off. Must be an animal or a draft moving things around. As they turned to leave, a loud thump echoed from the floor beneath them. Both men froze. Jean turned to Laurent, eyes wide. Did you hear that? Before Laurent could answer, the thump came again, this time louder. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the ground floor. The men exchanged uneasy glances but descended the stairs, gripping their flashlights tighter. When they reached the main hall, the source of the noise was nowhere to be found. But something far worse awaited them. Black smudged handprints streaked across the walls, hundreds of them, leading from the front door to the basement. Jean felt a chill shoot up his spine. Those weren't here when we came in? Laurent's voice wavered. It's like someone's trying to get out. The handprints, clawing at the walls, were unmistakably human, but smeared in something thick and black, almost like tar. The two men stood frozen in place, their disbelief giving way to a primal fear. The walls felt like they were closing in, the very air growing thicker by the second. Jean tried to steady his voice. Let's check the basement. Maybe it's kids messing with us. But Laurent hesitated, his eyes locked on the handprints. This feels wrong, Jean. We shouldn't go down there. Jean, too proud to admit he was scared, forced a smirk. There's no such thing as ghosts. Let's go. They made their way down the creaky stairs into the basement. It was pitch black, the musty air thick with dust. Their flashlights flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. The basement was large, with stone walls that felt like they belonged in a dungeon. In the far corner, a door sat slightly ajar, leading to an old storage room. The door creaked open as they approached, revealing a small, dark space. Inside, the air was ice cold. Jean shined his flashlight inside, and his breath caught in his throat. In the center of the room sat a small wooden box, covered in dust. It was worn, and looked as though it hadn't been touched in years. But what sent a shiver down Jean's spine was the strange symbol carved into the lid. A circle, with a jagged line through the middle. It was the same symbol Marianne had scratched into her hospital bed over and over again during her episodes. What the hell is this? Laurent whispered, stepping closer. Jean reached out to open the box, but as his fingers touched the lid, a loud bang erupted from above, like something had slammed into the walls of the house. Both men jumped back, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. A low, guttural whisper filled the room, coming from all directions at once. Leave, now. Jean's hands trembled as he pulled the box toward him, opening it slowly. Inside was a small, delicate baby's shoe, old and crumbling with age. Next to it was a lock of hair, tied with a black ribbon. Jean's heart pounded in his ears as the whispering grew louder, turning into angry hissing. The air grew colder, and the walls seemed to tremble. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut above them. Laurent panicked, rushing toward the stairs. We need to get out, now. Jean grabbed the box and followed, his mind racing. The house seemed to groan as they bolted up the stairs, the whispering now a deafening chorus of voices. As they reached the main floor, they saw her. Standing in the hallway was the figure of a woman, her form draped in tattered black rags. Her face was hidden beneath a veil, but her presence was undeniable. The air around her shimmered with darkness. Her hand, covered in the same black substance as the prints on the walls, reached out toward them. The officers didn't need any more convincing. They sprinted out of the house, not daring to look back, their hearts racing as they reached their car. They drove off into the night, leaving the cursed house behind. Jean and Laurent never spoke about what they had seen that night. Officially, their report stated that the house was abandoned, with no evidence of any supernatural presence. But both men were haunted by the events. Laurent left the force soon after, plagued by nightmares of the woman in black. Jean, however, became obsessed. He couldn't stop thinking about the box, the shoe, the handprints. He started researching the house's history, determined to uncover the truth about La Femme Noire and the curse that lingered over Rue de la Lune. But he never found peace. A month after the investigation, Jean disappeared without a trace. His car was found parked near the house, the driver's door wide open. Inside, investigators found a single baby's shoe resting on the driver's seat, along with the same black handprints smeared across the dashboard. The house on Rue de la Lune remains abandoned to this day, a silent sentinel to the horrors within. No one dares to enter, for fear of becoming the next victim of La Femme Noire, who still searches for her lost child in the shadows of the cursed home.